In this video, I'm going to continue coding up this site right here. If you've missed the previous ones, I'd encourage you to go check those ones out. If you go back 3 videos, you see how I designed the site. And over the past 2 videos, I've set everything up, started working on my Sass, set up all my typography, and now we're getting into the more interesting part, which doesn't look so nice right now. But if we look at the finished design of it, it's going to be a carousel type thing. Now it's not going to be nice and animated. I'm going to be using CSS grid and just a little bit of JavaScript to get this to move and go around. So they're just going to sort of switch spots instead of nice animations. It's more of a proof of concept of something that I want to try with grid rather than a really, really pretty thing, but I think it's going to be functional and work well. So that's the main focus for this video, is this section right here. So we might as well get started on that. Alright, so one thing I've done off camera is I have styled up my navigation, so you can see it's looking pretty good. Just really quickly, what I've done here is you can see I have my nav and I've put all my styles on here. So I've done a position absolute on it just to get it where I wanted it. And then I added a border, which is my line going across the top, and I've done a little bit of extra stuff on here just to style it using Flexbox for spacing everything out. Now, one thing that's a little bit different that you might not know about, and the only reason I'm really looking at this, is the way I've used my nesting. So here you can see I have my nav, and then inside there I have my UL, my A, and then my A hover thing here. So this is all part of Sass, how you can nest things. So just to take a look here quickly, if I go and I look at my compiled CSS, and I scroll down to my navigation, you can see here that what that's done is it's outboarded my nav and then nav UL and then nav A and then my nav A hover. So when I was doing that, I just have to nest this inside and it's giving me outboarded CSS like we just saw. So just in case you're not used to Sass, that's what's happening with this nesting here. Another thing, just really fast before we move on, keep shrinking this away, but I realized that I forgot to include my left arrow and right arrow in the file. So if you grab the starting files off of GitHub before, you'll need to go and get those again because those 2 files are missing. But I have added those into there. So those 2 files are on the GitHub page now. All right, so we can really get started now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring those 2 arrows in actually. So let's go over to my index here. I won't need my nav anymore. I don't need my intro. All right, so I'm going to bring those arrows in and I'm just going to do them. I'm going to create a button because button, and my button should have a class on it. So our new class is equal to, I'm going to do grid carousel left. That makes sense. And then in here, I'll put my SVG. And just like before, I'm going to do it as an inline SVG because it makes it a little bit easier to make some changes to if ever I need to, even though in this case, I don't think I'm going to need to. So left arrow, I can literally just copy what I have there, paste it right in. And then if you don't like how long it all is, it's nice and easy. SVG, you can just shrink all that down. So you're just looking at your button there. So that's my left, and let's copy. Let's go down all the way to the end of this, and I can bring in my button. So this one's gonna be button grid carousel right, and once again, go grab my other SVG. Super. So I think we're ready to go. So let's just hit save, and I should see those 2 buttons showing up. Now they're going to be really, really big and sort of get in our way, but we're going to fix that first thing. Yeah, we'll fix that right away just so they're not too annoying. So I'm going to have to make a new file. So in my layout here, the layout folder that I have, I'm going to make a new file called _ beer.scss. That's the name of my section, so beer works for me. I could add in another folder here called components and make a carousel component, which would be something popular to see, where the carousel would be something you could use in multiple areas. It wouldn't be really limited to this section, but just because this is a simple site and it's only being used in here, I'm going to leave it in with this section here. And with my beer file here, I'm going to go over to my main, and I need to import that. So add import layout beer. And I'll hit save on there, and now we can come over here. Now this isn't how it's going to stay, but just while I do my layout, I'm just going to say SVG width of like 1M or something, just to get them out of the way, because they're obviously way too big and annoying right now. So we'll have to fix that up. So I'll come back to this after and get rid of it. But for the moment, let's start doing this. And before I do that, quickly, if we look at my markup, I'm going to turn word wrap off for a second here. I have my section intro, then I have my section beer, then I have my section mission, section brewery, and for the most part, they're all going to be following the same type of sort of grid system-y thing. This one's a little bit different. But I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to come onto here, and also in my layout here, I'm going to make another new folder called _general.scss. And I'm going to use this general one as something that applies to the whole site. Layout things, because it's in my layout folder. So layout stuff that applies everywhere. It doesn't belong to one specific area. So general layout things. And I'm going to come over to my main, and that's going to be the very first one I import. So add import layout/general. Now, one thing with what I'm going to do here, it might cause some issues up here, so we might have to refactor a couple of things. But what I want to do is say my section is a display grid. And you know what? I think I did this already on this one. So let's just go look there. I said I'm going to have to refactor a little bit, but I think what I pretty much want is these two lines of code. So I'm actually going to cut that from here, save that, so it's going to break for a second, and I'm going to paste it in here. So if you missed that or you don't remember, what this is doing is it's setting a minimum and maximum, and this, maybe I could just shrink this down. I can't do one. We'll say 300 pixels, so it could be technically responsive without having to make it fully responsive. So yeah, what this is doing is it's setting up a grid for me that I can use in my project. So you can see this has gone back to how it was, but now all of my sections are falling into that same grid and it's destroying everything. But it's going to make my life a lot easier, especially because all of them would be using this same pattern anyway. On here, we could probably also come and set a little bit of padding on them. Padding, I use 10 VH 0. For this one, I don't think I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of them, because if I go and look at the other ones, it's quite smaller, my padding that I'd want to have, and even these are getting really close together. So I think for now, I'm just going to go with like a 5M0, and we'll see how that looks, and we'll play with it a little bit from there. But I think the spacing on that will just be a little bit better. So now we can start laying things out on that. So that's my general, so this applies to the whole site. I think that is done. I don't need my intro anymore, and we'll come over to my beer here. So right away we have my section. And I just closed this, but I'm going to go back to my general. I'm just trying to think of how to lay out all of this, but I think the easiest thing would be my, I'm going to use ampersand title, comma, ampersand subtitle, comma, and P. So all my section titles, so again, the ampersand is sort of like taking this and writing it out like that. So section title, section subtitle, and my paragraphs, which is all I'm using on this site. And these are going to go with a grid row, a grid column. And just to show you what I'm doing actually in Firefox, if you're not using Firefox and using CSS Grid, please use Firefox. If you do your nice little inspect element, you can then come over to here to layout. And what this layout thing does is it gives you an overview of the grid. So here I can turn on my grid that I'm using. So you can see each one of my sections has the same grid. So the grid column, you can see that I have line number 1, line number 2, line number 3, and line number 4 over there. And this also works the other way. This is in, if I scroll all the way to the bottom actually. Here we go, the negative. So -1, -2, -3, -4, just so you can work backwards on your grid. So I want all of these to start at 2 and end at 3, so I can just do 2 over 3. And if I just put the number 2, it would work too, but I like being very explicit in how I do it. So you can see that that has laid this out in the area that I want it to be. And I'm pretty sure that's gonna, not everything's gonna be perfect, clearly. Curious what's happening with those. We'll explore those when we get there. But this should cause most things that we're working on to work a little better. So now I can worry about my grid carousel. Actually, let's just do section beer, text align center. I think everything in this part is a text align center, so we can leave that there. And now we can do my grid carousel. So this is the fun part and the more interesting part, I think, for this one. So what I can do is a grid column of 1 over -1. So if you remember, the negatives are starting on the opposite side. So 1 is all the way on this side, all the way to that side, and now that will keep it out of my little corner there. So that's a start. And on this, I'm also going to do a display grid. And I want to do a grid auto flow over, I don't need much space. I'm going to just say like 1M repeat. So I have 5 beers, so I'm going to do repeat by 5. Let's turn word, let's get rid of this for a second. There we go. Give us a bit more room. Repeat 5, 1FR, and 1M. So if I hit save on that, there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that one. And am I just out of space? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's go and look at my grid. Section intro, section beer, grid carousel. 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What if I just make this a bit bigger? 2. This button, maybe it's not fitting, or actually, if I go back to here, I probably didn't put it inside my grid. Yeah, whoops. Remove that from here, and after my figure, put it there. It wasn't even in my grid, so of course, it's not going to be showing up. There we go. That works a little bit better. Okay. So if you're not used to the FR unit, it's just like an equal amount of leftover space. So if there's lots of leftover space, it can take that space, and if there's no leftover space, it will shrink down. So that's pretty good, except if I turn this off, they're getting a little bit too spread out. So I think I'm also going to do a max width on my whole carousel. Let's try 1000 pixels and a margin of, I'm going to put some space on the top and bottom, 3M0. I also find the text, actually I just thought of something though. The text, I'm going to leave it like this. I was going to put a grid gap, but my pictures are far enough apart and these are going to disappear. Okay, so that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. I'm going to have to play with my spacing a little bit. But I'm pretty happy overall with how that's looking. And now if I get too wide, oh, whoops, this should be auto, not 0. Except they're not really getting far enough apart, so I'm going to try 1200 instead. That looks better. And then, good. Alrighty. So that is, I'm pretty happy with that. I want my buttons to look a little different, and I need that white. If we go back to the design, these ones are supposed to be fading out, and I think the easiest way to do that is going to be with a pseudo element. So I'm going to do an and before and after on this, and then this is going to be, hopefully it's going to work. So for both of these, they're going to have content which will be nothing. They're going to both be a display of block. They're both going to have a position of absolute, which means this needs a position of relative on it. For now, I'm going to make the background RGBA. If you don't know SAS, you can do something like that. With RGBA, you can just put a value in, pink or or a hex code or whatever you want, RGB, any value you want. You don't actually have to put an RGB value with your A, which is really, really nice. Let's just hit save, and we probably won't see anything yet. Okay. Position absolute with grid is really, really awesome. So what I can do is say top 0, bottom 0, left 0, right 0, because I want it to take up an entire cell. Now it's taking up the whole thing, which obviously isn't what we want, but it makes sense because this is position absolute to my grid's position relative. So it's covering my whole thing. But what I can do is I can say grid column. I want it to start here and end here. So that's line 1. No, actually I want it to start here. So line 2 to line 3 to line 4. So from 2 to 4. And I can save on that, and now it's only going over those two. Isn't that fun and cool? I love that. So yeah, if you have absolutely positioned things on a grid, it's really, really easy. And the only thing is, that one should only be my before. And then I can take this, paste, that's my after. And actually I should just be able to do, let's turn on my numbers. -2, yeah, I can just do -2 to -4 because it's going the opposite direction. So starting from here and going that way instead of, I could also do from 5 to 7. They would both work. Cool, cool, cool. So that's working. Now the only thing is I don't want my background to be like this. I want it to be a gradient. So I'm actually going to take that off now that I can see that it's working. And we'll do background is linear gradient. And it's going to go from an RGBA white 0.8, I guess we'll start it with. And it's going to go to an RGBA of white, I don't know, 0.4. We'll try that. Except it's going from top to bottom, so this should be to the right, towards the right, because it's on the left. There we go. Except I'm actually going to up these a little bit. Maybe a 0.9 all the way to like, I really want these outside ones to be faded out a little bit. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. I can turn off this grid. So that's working really well. Copy this one that I have here and paste it right there. I'll turn word wrap just so we can see it. So it's my linear gradient to right. So this one will be to left instead because I want it to start here and go towards the left. And perfect. That's all I need to change there. Look at that. Perfect. The only other thing is I want to turn off the text. I want to make this text only visible on the middle one, which I'm not sure how I'm going to do, to be honest. I had an idea, but now that I'm thinking about it, we're going to get there after once I've done some JavaScript. But for my buttons now, let's style those buttons. I'm trying to remember what I called them. I think I might change my name. Button, grid carousel, right. This would almost make more sense as like grid carousel button and grid carousel button, and then I could do a modifier on it for the right and the left. Or even, let's just do button. And then I can do a JS left. This one's the right. Button. And the reason I'm adding, so this is my grid carousel button, JS right. My JS, the left. I'm mixing those up. So this is going to be for styling purposes, and this is here only for JavaScript purposes. It's not actually going to do anything for my styles. So that's why I prefixed it with this JS here to say, like, don't look for this in the CSS. You're not going to find anything. This is really just for JavaScript purposes, so I can target it easily and manipulate it and do stuff with it. So I'm going to save that, and we're going to come over to here, and up here where I said SVG, I'm going to change this to my grid. Or even we can take it over here. I'm going to say and button. I just want to see actually if I just hit save. I don't even have to style it now that it's inside my grid. I just want to take the button. I don't want like this massive thing on it because it looks really weird. So one easy way, and the browser support for this isn't amazing, but all, which selects every single property, and onset, which just takes everything away. So if you need, to do that, you can, but why is it only doing it on one of them? Did I misspell it? Good Carousel button. And what's this one down here? Guys, why didn't you tell me when I was doing this? Copy that. Paste that here, and grid carousel item, which I didn't even really need that class on there, I think. I might, we'll see. That was silly of me. Hopefully you noticed that when I was doing it. Alright, and they're obviously way too big, and I don't like that it's touching the sides, actually. So we're going to have to do a little bit of changes on here. The first thing I'm going to do is just make these 1M, because then that's going to limit the size of those to be a little bit smaller, which looks a little bit nicer. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my general, because I realized I never did this. Star, comma, star before, comma, star after. And box sizing border box, because that's going to be useful here. And padding 0.5M. Yeah, I just made my padding the whole size of my button, so I can bring these back up to 2, just to keep that off the side there, because if not, it looks kind of weird when it's touching the sides of my screen. Awesome. And that's going to be it for this video. I hope you liked it. I hope you found this was fun and interesting to do the layout of this. In the next one, we're going to be looking at how we can actually make this with JavaScript, so we can click on these and make the whole thing move around. I think it's going to be fun. And as a little bit of a bonus to you guys, you won't have to wait a whole week for that video. It will be out in a couple of days. So you can look forward to that before we get into the rest of the site.